does not blame Jews for killing Jesus, and the reason for that is that Islam believes that Jesus was never killed. It says it explicitly in the 4th chapter, Surah 4, verse 157. In 636, the Islamic world went to battle with the Byzantine Empire and defeated it, and then came here to the land of Israel and controlled it. Therefore, in the Islamic view, the Jews have been replaced. In Islamic view, this land belongs to Islam. The Jews cannot have any control, any shlit over this land, especially that they believe that their third holiest site is here in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
There's a serious divide happening right now in America, with people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens on one side, and Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee on the other, all arguing about Israel, religion, and what's actually true. At the same time, Israel is under direct attack from Iran. This isn't theoretical, it's happening right now. So the question is, what does Judaism actually say about all of this, about Christianity, and about Islam? And there are very few people in the world who have spent more time studying, debating, and challenging these exact ideas than Rabbi Tovia Singer. Rabbi Singer, it's great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
When you look at this divide, like I mentioned, with Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens on one side and figures like Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee on the other side, is this just a political disagreement, or are we watching long-standing theological tensions within Christianity towards the Jewish people resurfacing in real time?
Right. So Ted Cruz is an example, or Mike Huckabee. Both of them are Southern Baptist Christians. Huckabee is an ordained Southern Baptist minister. He was a pastor before he was the 14th governor of the state of Arkansas. Their version of Christianity is rather young and rather recent, and it emerged in the United States when a British theologian, John Nelson Darby, came to America in the 19th century and spread a view that was radical, although it shouldn't be if you open up Tanakh. So let's go with the church and their view. The church's view is the one that's the Candace Owens view, it's the Tucker Carlson view, it's the Nick Fuentes view, and that's a replacement theology. The church has always understood the Jewish people as once being chosen. That's very important. The church has always viewed the Jewish people, even in the Christian Bible, Paul says this in Romans chapter 3, that the covenant was given to the Jews and the oracles of God were given through the Jewish people. Nevertheless, the church fathers all stated that the Jewish people were no longer chosen and were replaced by the church. And this is very critical, the Jews would never return to Israel to have sovereignty again. Moreover, again, this is the patristic period. So in this period, during the time of the church fathers, the Temple Mount looked nothing like it looks today. Muslim armies only arrive here to Israel in 637 after defeating the Byzantine Empire. So the Temple Mount was, in Hebrew, a churban. It was rubble. And the church fathers saw that as a monument to what was left of the Jew, that the Jew was finished because he not only rejected Jesus, plotted against him, lied about him, and killed him, were responsible for committing the act of deicide. This is not an idea that reflects the ranting of a crazy person like Nick Fuentes. This is explicitly in the Christian Bible. The Jews are held accountable for killing Jesus and are uniquely held accountable for killing Jesus. All the church fathers viewed the destruction of the temple, destruction of the Commonwealth, destruction of Jerusalem as a symbol of the Jew who was finished with God and the covenant was done, and the church is the new Israel. This is called covenant theology, replacement theology, supersessionism. They all mean the exact same thing. And Augustine coalesces this idea, as does John Chrysostom. Both of them are highly revered church fathers. Even Protestants revere Augustine. Augustine, in his apologetic work against Manichaeism, the religion he once belonged to, and in his magnum opus, City of God, he stated explicitly that the Jews, so just to set up, the City of God is an apologetic work. The main thrust of the work is to address the problem as why was Rome destroyed in 410? Why was it sacked when Rome just converted to Christianity? Like, what'd you do? Okay, so he's addressing that, hence the title of the book. But he also addresses the status of the Jews. If the Jews are no longer chosen, if the promise made to the Jewish people is that they are the people of God and they have been rejected and the church is New Israel, then why are there Jews still here? He didn't come up with all this garbage that the Jews are not real Jews. He knew exactly who they were. That stuff is all modern stuff, which we could talk about. His conclusion was, and remains to be, the position of the church, and that is that God has preserved the Jewish people as a monument, just like the Temple Mount, a ruined people, a people that cannot and will not return to the land of Israel and never have sovereignty again over Jerusalem. And in his words, and Chrysostom, they all said this. There wasn't an Oscar Schindler among them. There wasn't like one nice guy. They all said this with one voice. Listen carefully, that the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the Jewish people and their degraded state in exile demonstrated that Christianity was a true religion and Judaism was now a false religion. This is very important. And therefore, the return of the Jewish people to their land, therefore, was a monumental problem for the church. Of course, Pope Pius X, when approached by Herzl on an infamous day, January 25th, 1904, Herzl, I think on a fool's errand, sought out Pius X's support for a Jewish state. Pius X told him very clearly, you made a very big mistake in rejecting Christ. We're not going to support your venture for a Jewish state. Moreover, we can't stop Jews from coming to Palestine, but if you do, our priests will surely be waiting there to baptize the Jews. So that's the standard of the church. So there's nothing new about that. And that's why all this weird stuff is going on, because they have to explain, well, why are the Jews there? The Jews are not really Jews. How do we know they're Jews? But certainly to support a Jewish state, the Jewish state essentially is a Nakba, is a complete catastrophe for this theology. Instead of reevaluating, and there are many Christians, even Catholics, that are Zionists, who don't buy into this stuff at all because they haven't reevaluated. But something happens in America, and that's the clash that you're watching now. John Nelson Darby, born in the very, very beginning of the 19th century in England, comes to America. America was a country that was fertile ground for philo-Semitic views. Now, his view is called premillennial dispensationalism. You've heard this term knocked around a lot. We're not going to pay attention to what those words mean unless you ask me. But what is germane to our viewers is that supersessionism was the motherlode of bad ideas, and God has a unique covenant with the Jewish people. That's what Speaker Johnson believes. All these Christian Zionists believe this, that the covenant that God forged with Israel is eternal, and it says so explicitly in the Bible. Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, he quotes Genesis chapter 12. He should also be quoting Numbers chapter 24, where it's speaking exclusively about the children of Israel. It's in the oracles of Bilam. It's all over Tanakh that the Jews cannot disappear. Moreover, the Hebrew Bible says explicitly that it is the survival of the Jew despite vicissitudes. It's his persistent survival that demonstrates the truthfulness of the God of Israel and the return and restoration of the Jew to his land, which has happened, that demonstrates that the God of Israel is true. That's explicit in the Hebrew Bible. And the Hebrew Bible, as you well know, is not a whitewashing of the Jewish people. All our mistakes and the mistakes of our greatest leaders are there on these pages for all the world to see. So that's what we see right now is a split. Now, Charlie Kirk, who headed the most influential organization in the Republican Party, was tragically murdered. Do not believe for a moment that he can be replaced. There will not be another Charlie Kirk. He was a remarkable man. And right now there's a battle. There's a battle for November 2028. There's a battle for the heart and soul of the Republican Party. And therefore, as we would expect, it is conservatives, meaning people who are supporters of Trump, who are now fighting for the destiny. Who is going to be the next candidate, and who should Republicans? We talk about evangelicals in America. We're talking about 70 million, about 1 out of every 5 Americans. What direction is it going in? Is it going in the direction of Tucker Carlson? Is it going in the direction of Nick Fuentes? Meaning, it's not that he's an isolationist. It's just he's an isolation when it comes to Israel. He's a virulent anti-Semite. People should stop saying that he's taking money from Qatar. He might be. I don't know. But what that does is it misdirects people to think that he has an ulterior motive. His guiding principle is to destroy the Jewish people and to destroy Israel. He's an isolationist in the way that Pat Buchanan was. I want to just make a point that I haven't heard anyone make, and it's just so important. For a moment, just think about this. If there were a nuclear exchange between Iran and Israel, okay? Let's say you don't care about either country. It would create an existential threat to the survival of the United States because a nuclear winter would emerge from it. Just like India and Pakistan, 2 countries, its borders are relatively, in the modern period, 1947. Both of them became nuclear powers in the 1990s. If they were to go to war, let's say just for a moment you don't care about them personally. If they were to have a nuclear exchange, the world would be transformed forever. What Donald Trump has done, whatever you think about him, he literally saved the world by destroying Iran's nuclear material and their ability to deliver it. But it is very much so. Therefore, it doesn't make sense that America first. If you're America first, you do not want a nuclear exchange. So this doesn't make sense politically. This is completely theological, and that's the divide. Divided is over what is called dispensationalism or Christian Zionism, or people who oppose replacement theology, and those who are the old-time Christians.
Now, speak a little bit about the timing of it. It seems that, all of a sudden, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they flipped at, some point after October 7th. And we didn't hear them speak this way before that. Did they always have these views? Were they hiding it? Did something happen that suddenly made them change their views?
Candace is hard to pin down because in that she went from one extreme, where she was just as pro-Israel as you could be, to this adopting the Roman Catholicism of her husband, George Farmer. So George Farmer is a Roman Catholic who embraces what's called a radical traditional Roman Catholicism. And that version of Catholicism rejects the Second Vatican Council, which was convened by Pius XXIII, who genuinely was a Philo-Semite, who becomes Pope on October 20th, 1958. The most controversial part of the Second Vatican Council is a document, Nostra Aetate. The 4th section is about the Jews, and most germane is that the Jews today refers to the Jews very positively, our elder brother, and anti-Semitism is opposed by the church, and all the anti-Semitic liturgy had to be removed. It was positive in every way. It does not Nosha Tete does not say that the Jews are chosen or anything like that, or that, that supersessionism, we oppose supersessionism. It doesn't go that far, but it is very, very positive in every way. So Candace has adopted her husband's extreme. He's called a rad trad, a radical traditionalist. She has adopted. Now, people talk about her relationship with Kanye West. I don't follow. Kanye West, unfortunately, is not well. He concedes that he suffers from bipolar. He should only have a refuah shlema. But I can't speak to that. I can only speak to the theology. Now, Tucker is different. Tucker worked for. He's been in broadcasting for a very long time, and he's very skilled at it. Very few people have the skill set he does in front of a camera. But he worked for 15 years for Fox News. If you work for Fox News, you can't be anti-Israel. They'll throw you out on your head. Tragically, I say tragically because I speak to the people who work at Fox. They ask them, like, why'd you fire him? Because once Fox fired him, he was free to say and express whatever ideas he wished to. He was no longer constrained, and that unleashed him. I always knew that he was no friend of Israel. That was always transparent. But he had to be very, very careful. So, for instance, in the old days, you had Pat Buchanan, who was the guy running around defending John Demjanjuk. If you remember, he was the guy on Crossfire, the conservative voice in Crossfire in the 1990s. Tucker took over for him in 2000 on Crossfire. So Tucker very much comes from that view. But while he worked for Fox News, he had to be very, very careful and very constrained. The people who work at Fox, who I know, tell me you have no idea how toxic he was. What can I say? It was just untenable. He was very profitable to Fox, but for whatever reason, he couldn't stay there. Once he was out of Fox, he was then free to go. And, of course, as he sees Trump is obviously extremely pro-Israel. There never was a Donald Trump. There never will be another Donald Trump. His father was the same way. That whole family has a deep affection for Israel, for Jewish people. And, of course, he's conservative. That's a natural relationship. But Trump has to be very, very careful right now because the midterm elections are not here yet. And while, of course, the executive branch is, Trump's there, and the judicial branch is now conservative, the legislative branch will be up for grabs. So Trump has to be very, very cautious right now about not alienating Tucker's constituency in the Republican Party.
Now, of course, we have millions of Christians that genuinely love Israel and the Jewish people. Can Christians be true allies of the Jewish people and be faithful to the New Testament?
Let me just say this. If you're looking for flattering things about Jews, I would not recommend the Christian Bible. If you're a Christian watching this, please don't be offended. I think most Christians, I know so many Christian Zionists who really have to work hard to explain certain passages in the Christian Bible which hold the Jews uniquely responsible for killing Jesus. And they do, and they explain them. The church fathers were not crazy. They weren't lunatics. But I want to get back to this. It's very clear. All right. Unless you want me to go very deep into this, people are really arguing over 3 chapters in the book of Romans. It's Paul's most influential and his longest letter, and it's specifically Romans 9 through 11, which is, believe it or not, those 3 chapters are marshaled by both sides of this argument of replacement theology. The people who are Christian Zionists who love Israel have a very good case because Paul, and again, full disclosure, I'm not a Christian. But if you want to know what Paul meant, Paul said explicitly that there was a period of time where the Gentiles need to be brought in, and the natural branches are broken away. But this is a special, unique, providential moment in time, and the branches that are grafted in should not boast. And he says that the promises made to Israel cannot be undone, cannot be destroyed. He says it explicitly in Romans chapter 11, verse 29. So therefore, Paul is very explicit that there's a certain plan here in time, which is a time for the Gentiles to be saved, but that the promises God made to the Jewish people are irrevocable. He says that explicitly. So therefore, the people who believe in replacement theology don't have a very good case. Now, the reason why most people reading these passages will not understand any of this is for the following reason. This is worth 60 seconds. The New Testament, I'm going to just change that and just say the letters of Paul, and that's where all the theology comes from, not from the Gospels, is using the term Jew rhetorically in two different ways. And this is what messes everyone up. So the word Jew is used in Paul's letters conventionally, the Jewish people, like the Jews gave us the oracles of God. But it's used in another way that's completely different. And that is that the Jew means those who are Christians, those who are saved, those who are heirs to the blessing. They are the true children of Sarah. It actually says it in Galatians chapter 4. So now, what people who believe in supersessionism must do is they have to conflate the two. So when Paul says in Romans chapter 2, verse 28 and 29, that he is a Jew is not the one who is outwardly a Jew, who's outwardly circumcised, he means the Jew rhetorically there as the person who is saved. He does not mean the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We see that explicitly because in the very next verse, literally, Romans chapter 3, verse 1, he said, is it not wonderful to be a Jew? Is it not wonderful to be, it is. And now the reason why Paul has to be very careful in the book of Romans is that his audience, who he's never met, it's his last of all of his letters, although it appears first in the Christian canon, is writing to an audience he's never met and has both the Jews and non-Jews who are reading it or the recipients of it. So therefore, what supersessionists must do, and it's easy to do this, is to conflate these two discrete, distinct usages of the term Jew and just conflate them together, and then you really can produce the kind of replacement theology that you hear all over the blog sphere.
I want to speak a little bit about the war with Iran. People are saying that this could be the beginning of the end of times. From a Jewish perspective, what signs are you seeing? Maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
This is very transparent. We are very much in the last stage of an order of events leading up to the final redemption. You know, the evening, the festival, the meal that is pregnant with more commandments and more tradition and customs than any other is the meal that we eat on the night, the 15th day of the first month. And if I were to do a survey and asking a committee, what should we call this meal, I don't even think the word Seder would be in the top 10. But that meal is called a Seder in order, and it's an order of 15 discrete events, one following the other. We are in that order of a redemptive process. The end-time war, which must happen immediately before the Messiah comes, requires that the Jews return to the land of Israel after Jacob's trouble. So I just want to lay out this order. Jeremiah chapter... By the way, all Christians will agree with this. This is just... Everything I'm saying is just... There's no conspiracy here. Jeremiah 30, verse 7, explicitly talks about the destruction of the Jewish people, the worst destruction of the Jewish people. Jeremiah is writing that 2,500 years ago. He lived in a bad time. He's saying there's a time coming that there is no parallel to it. It's a time of great tribulation for Jacob. However, umimeno yivoshea, those are the last two words, and from it will come your deliverance. The state of Israel is born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. The Jews must return to the land of Israel prior to the coming of the Messiah. 2, Jerusalem must be in their hands. Zechariah chapter 12. This must occur. This is explicit. Once the Jews, in fact, we have in Daniel 8 the precise dating for when Jerusalem would come back to the hands of the Jewish people. I don't want to confuse the audience. The key is then nations come to attack Israel over the status of Jerusalem. Explicitly, Jerusalem be a heavy, burdensome stone to all those who come against it. See Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3 and 4. Everything I'm saying, incidentally, again, is non-controversial. All Christians who who know their Bible. I mean, people who are, you don't have to be a professor, but people who know everything I'm saying is very clear. Then what happens is a massive attack against the Jewish people, even though we are very successful in that we're able to destroy our enemies. I will destroy all the enemies who come against Jerusalem. But nevertheless, there's a massive attack against the Jewish people that causes a mourning among the children of Israel. This, no doubt, is October 7th. Now let's move to Persia. In that 2,500 years ago, that the prophet would tell us that Israel's implacable enemy is Persia is counterintuitive at that time. Why? Because Persia was, in the past, in the ancient world, a rather benign empire toward the Jews. After all, it was Koresh, Cyrus, who told the Jews, go back and build a temple after the Babylonian exile. So it makes no sense. And the Persian Empire, the Sasanian Empire, was always friendly towards the Jews. There were exceptions, but basically it was a friendly. Moreover, Persia is not an Arab country, and it shares no border with Israel. And there's more than 1,000 kilometers between us, which means that in the ancient world, it would be impossible for Israel and Persia to go to war against each other because there's a whole bunch of land in between. Now, if we were talking about an Arab country, so it's true, Yishmael, the Arabs, the Bnei Ishmael, and the Yitzchak, or the Jews, had a tenuous relationship, but the Talmud says openly that at the end of days, Yishmael would repent, would turn back to the Jewish people. Ezekiel 38 is where we get all of this from. Ezekiel is, although he is not the only prophet who articulates this end-time war, in fact, the last third of the book of Zechariah is about this war, but Ezekiel gives us, like he always does, provides copious details that there's just no parallel to it. He says explicitly that God is going to drag the enemies of Israel to war, literally like putting hooks in the mouth of the beast. See Ezekiel 38, verse 4. Verse 5, it's Persia, along with its Yoyatseim, all of its allies, its proxies are going to go to war with Israel. God is going to destroy them utterly, completely. It then goes back and says they're going to see Israel an open area where there are no bars or gates. They're going to attack, and that's going to ignite the fury of the Almighty. See Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's explicitly there. I'm just going to skip over the 39. All talks about the destruction of the enemies of Israel, utterly destroyed. I want to concentrate on the last passages from Ezekiel 39, 21, 1 through 29. I plead with you, the viewer. I know sometimes the prophets can be intimidating. These chapters are not. They're very easy to read, and you're never going to hear this from a rabbi. You don't need a commentary. Moreover, I'll even say this, the commentaries of the ancient world and the medieval period said that the generation of the Geula, the generation that lives during the time of the redemption, will understand these passages better than we do. And we shouldn't speculate on them. Well, we're in that. Therefore, we see things like you and I don't know each other. However, I could say with confidence that you, Daniel, your great-great-grandfather 150 years ago could not have imagined what's happening right now. If you told him, he would have just lost his mind. But it's happening now. Now, we're told explicitly that the world will watch this conflict. Verse 21, and all the nations of the world, because of this war and because of the destruction of Persia and V'yoyatseim and its proxies, its helpers, all the nations will know that I am Lord. Next verse, Israel will know that I am Lord. These verses cannot possibly refer to the church or replacement here. None of that is possible. The reason is simple. Continue reading. The text then says, look, you, the children of Israel, because of your sins, you were sent to exile. Because of your faithlessness, you were sent to lands abroad. So the text is clearly identifying Jewish history. This is unmistakable. However, I am going to return you back to this land, and I'm going to restore you, and I will destroy all your enemies. And that's why this war is taking place right now between Persia and Israel. It said that all the world, this is the last section of Jewish history before the Messiah comes. The nations will see the victory of Israel, the destruction of the enemies. Then the nations will know that I am Lord, and that is the moment we are right now.
Let's speak for a little bit about Islam. What do you think Islam gets right? What does it get wrong? And are the extremists twisting Islam, or is it following it exactly the way it's meant to be?
So theologically, Islam is respected as a true monotheism and as one that does not blame Jews for killing Jesus. And the reason for that is that Islam believes that Jesus was never killed. It says it explicitly in the 4th chapter, Surah 4, verse 157. So Jewish life in Islamic lands was, comparatively speaking, better. However, Muslims believe that the world could be divided into two parts. One section is Dar al-Islam, lands that were in the hands of the Islamic world, and I'll translate it, land. Dara, by the way, in Hebrew means like a dira. It means an abode, and of war, lands of war. It means lands that have never been in Islamic hands. In 636, the Islamic world went to battle with the Byzantine Empire and defeated it, and then came here to the land of Israel and controlled it. Not every moment. The Christians came here and probably had a century in this land, but therefore, in the Islamic view, the Jews have been replaced. In Islamic view, this land belongs to Islam. While the Jews enjoy protection, if they pay an appropriate tax, they can't be forced to convert to Islam, so we're a protected group, but the Jews cannot have any control, any shlit over this land, especially that they believe that their third holiest site is here in Jerusalem, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So to the Islamic world, that the Jews have defeated Islamic armies and they're here in the land of Israel is a absolute catastrophe. In fact, that term catastrophe is used to describe the state of Israel, a Nakba. It's a blight that has to be undone. There are some Muslims who I know very well who are Zionists, incidentally, because this idea of Dar al-Islam is not in the Quran. It's not mentioned there. But nevertheless, the vast majority of the Islamic world held these views. And I use the word held because there's something startling happening. And that is that because we have a tradition, after all, Yishmael gives kadimus. How do I translate that? When Abraham passes away, so it says in Isaac and Ishmael, so Isaac goes first, and Ishmael went to bury their father in Hebron. Hebron's only 30 minutes from where I am right now. So the Gemara in Bava Basra, the Talmud says that in fact Ishmael did tshuva, repents, and in some way the Bnei Ishmael at the end of days will return back to the people of Israel. What is very striking is like, why Persia? And one of the things that's happening right now, which I certainly... But, we're living, it's God's world and we're living in it. What's happening is Iran, strangely, is attacking the Sunni Gulf states. By so doing, Persia is driving the Arabs into a friendship and a relationship with Israel. So whereas the Arab world viewed Israel as the greatest threat, meaning they were looking west and saying, that's our greatest threat, they are now looking east and going, no, our greatest threat is in Iran. Iran is a Shia country. It has been a Shia country since the very, very early 16th century. And for those who don't know, there are no Shia Muslims here in Israel. And Sunni Muslims, which comprise about 90% of the Islamic world, consider Shia Islam to be complete idolatry. That means if a Muslim is going to speak transparently to you, I have a lot of friends who are Muslim, they will tell me explicitly they believe that Judaism is closer to Sunni Islam than Shia is. They consider Shia Islam to be a complete, even though it began as a political split in the very early days of the Islamic world, because of their beliefs, they consider Shia to be the complete heresy. So it's very striking that this is the time we're living in right now.
Now, although they have this divide, it seems that they were united in order to destroy Israel, right? I mean, Iran and its proxies are Sunni Shia divide. Is that correct?
Right. So its proxies in Lebanon are Shia. Hezbollah is Shia. As I said, there are no Shia in Israel that I know of, but in Lebanon there are plenty. But the Hamas in Gaza, those are all Sunnis, as the Arabs in Judea and Samaria are Sunnis. And they were able to set aside their differences for the common goal of destroying Israel.
In the Quran, it speaks about the land of Israel belonging to the Jewish people, right? Is that there are
Yes.
verses like that?
Yes, that's correct.
Why do they deny, or they don't speak about these verses? It seems like you don't really hear about it.
Oh, so the Muslim will tell you that the Jews were chosen. It's very, very clear in the Quran. However, because they rejected the teachings of Isa, meaning Jesus, so in the view of Islam, Jesus was not just a prophet, but he was what's called a Rasul, which means that he had a specific message. So he had Sharia means a written message, and his message was to the Jews, and that message is to keep the Torah. And because the Jews rejected Jesus' Sharia, which just means message, so therefore they lost their chosenness, and now Islam has totally replaced Israel. So it's like the radical tradition. I want to say it's the Muslims. I don't mean to, because they'd be very offended by this. And some things I'm saying they might be offended by, but I don't want to be offended by the wrong thing. So Islam is complete replacement theology, that the Jews were chosen, Israel was given to the Jews, the promises were made to they all believe that. However, the Jews lost that because they rejected Jesus. In the case of Christianity, that's why it's much worse with Christianity. With Christianity, we actually killed Jesus. In Islam, we didn't really kill the guy, he only ascended. He's going to come back and rule for 40 years and get married and have a wife and kids and then die. So therefore, the rage in the Christian world, and the New Testament itself says things that are much more extreme about the Jews than the Quran does. But yes, Islam is a complete replacement theology in that the Muslims are the chosen people, are the people who will be saved.
You mentioned that the New Testament speaks worse about Jews than the Quran does, correct?
Yeah, yes.
How come it seems that Muslims nowadays are more anti-Semitic than Christians?
The anti-Semitism in the Islamic world is rife, but it's all plagiarized. It's Christian anti-Semitism, which they just copied and pasted it. I don't say that demeaningly. They just borrowed it all, just like the communists were godless, but they borrowed all the caricature of the Jew of the Orthodox Church, which the Soviets hated Christianity. They were godless, but they were very happy to borrow the anti-Semitism that was in Tsarist Russia. So therefore, Islam, if there were no state of Israel, or very simple, if all the Jews in Israel would say we're converting to Islam, there would be no issue at all. Then they could care less about Palestine. They'd care less about Palestine. None of that would matter. The key is that Jews are here in control of Al-Aqsa, in control of Jerusalem, in control of a land that was controlled by Islam. Therefore, Israel must be eradicated. Either it could be through total destruction, which the Arabs try to do in the war in all the wars they try to do, or they'll do it through piecemeal, through, we'll take it piece by piece and we'll have a hudna, have some sort of relationship with Israel, and then eventually we'll use that as a platform to eradicate them. But if there were no state of Israel, things will be very different. It is when Muslims portray Jewish life in Islamic lands as a complete honeymoon, that's not accurate either. But you cannot compare the life of a Jew in Islamic hands, meaning in Islamic lands and history, to what the Jewish life was in Christian land. There's no parallel to it. Jewish life in the Islamic world prior to the State of Israel, prior to Zionism, you can't compare the two. If a Jew is willing to live as a dhimmi and pay his taxes and so on. It wasn't perfect. There were pogroms. There were pogroms long before Zionism. There were forced conversion of Jews in Persia. It happened, but there's no parallel to what happened to the experience. There was no Holocaust. There was no parallel to what happened to Jews in Christian lands. You just can't compare the two.
A few weeks ago, Tucker Carlson was speaking about how the state of Israel went to war and wants to shoot down the Golden Dome, the mosque, so that they can rebuild the temple. This is something that got millions of views. But how wrong is this? I mean, we can't just rebuild the temple that way.
Let me just be very clear. If Charlie Kirk had given his speech at Hebrew University anywhere here in Israel, he'd be alive today. That means Christians are protected in Israel, and Christian sites are protected in this land. Bethlehem has, I don't even think 10% of Bethlehem is Christian any longer. And Bethlehem was 70 years ago Christian. Let's say 80% of it is Christian. Conversely, in contrast, Nazareth, which is under Israel's control, Christian life is flourishing. So it's just the opposite. Here is where Christian sites are protected. This is where Christians are protected. Now, when he talks about a third temple, he should be very careful. Tucker admitted, I think it was a few weeks ago, that he just read the Bible for the first time last year. All right. I don't even believe he did that, but it's very clear in the Hebrew Bible that there will be a temple. I mean, he's claiming to be a Christian. He says he's an Episcopalian. I have no reason to not believe him, but Episcopalians believe that the book of Ezekiel is the Word of God. And I encourage Tucker Carlson to open up his Bible, and it's there. I would encourage him to read a chapter called The Valley of Dry Bones, which talks about the restoration of the Jewish people, and the last 4 passages. And I encourage Tucker to use your whatever translation you want. There'll be a sanctuary that will be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and there will be a covenant of peace that God will make. Moreover, from Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48, we have copious details, unused blueprints of a third temple. This is not written by some crazy Zionist. This is written by Ezekiel, who's a prophet, who your church considers the Word of God. Now, Tucker, I challenge you to take your Bible and throw it in the garbage if you don't believe in it. But this is not an idea that some Zionist or the Netanyahu government, which he keeps referring to as, we didn't come up with this. This is in the Bible that Christians consider the Word of God. So I would be very careful about what you're saying. Scripture is very clear that there will be a temple built, but no, look, we all have crackpots. I'm not saying we don't have a nut job somewhere in Israel, and I'm sure there are plenty of Christian crazy. We're not talking about them. No one is interested in destroying anything. However, there is a promise that the temple will be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and we trust the God of Israel. He'll keep his promise. That nobody's fighting to destroy Al-Aqsa, Dome of the Rock. They're all safe as long as they're under the protection of the Jewish people. And in fact, it was the church, Tucker's religion, that destroyed the Islamic sites, not the Jews.
Right now, the pressure is coming from both the left and the right. Is that something new? Is the anti-Semitism that we're experiencing today different than something in the past?
I've never seen anything like it, neither of you. The Overton window has simply been demolished completely. There's nothing, and it's counterintuitive. One would think October 7th, I mean, there's just for those who have even a perfunctory knowledge, there's just no parallel to it of a terror attack against Jews. So we think of Kristallnacht. So Kristallnacht, November 10th, 1938, which was the precursor event of the Holocaust. 92 Jews were murdered on that night, which marked Luther's birthday. There's no parallel to 1,200 Jews being murdered in a matter of hours. The Kishinev pogroms of 1903 on Passover, which had a tectonic impact on the Jewish world. Jabotinsky, he didn't live in Kishinev, but he lived a few towns over. That's what transformed him. In that pogrom, which took place over 2 days on Passover, about 50 Jews were murdered. So there's no parallel to this. One would think that the a window of sympathy would have opened that in that Hamas went to war with Israel, but the reverse has occurred. Now, there were always David Dukes out there. There were. But they were considered crazies and fringe, and people didn't pay attention to them. And they were, interviewed on Phil Donahue's show as crackpots. But today, what Tucker is doing, and he's very smart, he's interviewing these people like Nick Fuentes, who are willing to say things that even he won't say, the man is an open racist, white supremacist, anti-Semite, Christian identity. I don't even know what words to say about him. And he simply interviews him. And when Nick Fuentes says that he's a fan of Stalin, I don't know if the viewers understand the magnitude of what he's saying. Stalin is responsible for the murder of, let's say, 20 million people. I mean, Stalin, fan of Stalin? So, and Tucker say, let's pin that. So he's bringing on people who's saying that Churchill is the villain of World War II rather than Hitler. So that's what Tucker's doing. He is simply laundering the extreme, and therefore the Overton window, the window of acceptable discourse is just completely demolished. And he's doing that very effectively. And I encourage people to take him very seriously. His guiding principle is the destruction of the Jews in Israel.
It seems that, speaking of Tucker, that when he has Nick Fuentes on, people like that, he gives them very easy interviews. He doesn't push back on them. But when he has somebody like Ted Cruz or Mike Huckabee, he attacks them, doesn't let them speak. I mean, it's just two different styles that he has. I mean, obviously, people that he disagrees with, he has more of a combative tone. I mean, is that correct assessment?
Yes. Tucker has an extraordinary skill set. He's not a journalist. He's an activist. His goal is to destroy Israel. There's more I can tell you about it. I'll leave it off air and let the Trump administration work out what it needs to work out. Trump knows exactly what he's doing. But that's correct. When he had on Nick Fuentes on, when he had on all these clowns on who are virulent anti-Semites, he gives them a wide berth and nothing is challenged. When he brings on Ted Cruz, who's a Christian Zionist, a remarkable man, brings on or is interviewed by Mike Huckabee in Israel's airport. I mean, after saying that he hates Christian Zionists more than anyone, I mean, the New Testament says love your enemy, let alone fellow Christians. That's insane. So Mike Huckabee is a very nice guy, and I had the pleasure to give him tours of Israel. He's really quite a fellow and a very strong Christian. So it's two different worlds. So he has the skill set to know how to go after those he dislikes, because he's not a journalist. He's an activist. His goal, as I said, is to destroy Israel, and he's very effective at what he does, but Trump is watching everything.
Now, what should Christians watching this understand about Jews and the state of Israel clearly? If you had to give them a message or two, what would it be?
We have a God who made a promise, and he made a promise, and it goes like this. And Christians will appreciate Jeremiah 31, and they know exactly why. So there's a promise made by the God of Israel, and he says the following: look up at the sky. Do you see the sun? Look up at the sky at night, the stars and the moon illuminated. If the very foundations of the earth can be measured, so will I cast off the seed of Jacob from being a nation before me. Jeremiah 30, verse 3 says that the Jews must return back to the land of Israel. So therefore, I say this to Christians. It's in the Bible, the restoration of the Jewish people. The covenant that God made with Israel is irrevocable, cannot be undone, not by the United Nations, not by a quartet, not by Tucker Carlson. So it's the scripture that are guiding us, and we're living in a remarkable time. I also want to say this, that there are a lot of Catholics who are watching us right now. And I want to say this, that it is true that the church fathers made these claims. There's nothing that could be said about, because I have a lot of Catholic Zionists who talk to me and ask me, how do we deal with all these passages? I said, you're going to have a problem with the church fathers, because you can see always it's the church fathers. You know, when Sean had on this priest on, always quoting the church fathers. In Catholic theology, the church fathers could have been wrong about these issues, and A Catholic Zionist can believe that it is God's providential plan to bring the Jews back to the land of Israel. This is not ex cathedra that the Jews cannot return back to the land of Israel. The church fathers said that, but that's not from the magisterium. There is no dogma like that in the Catholic Church, and therefore with that, I don't remember her name, whatever her name is. She became a Catholic 20 minutes before that, who proclaimed that Catholics can't be Zionists. I don't know where she's pulling this stuff out of. The Catholic Church never made that statement. Now, it's true that the church fathers never imagined in their wildest dreams that the Jews would ever return. But nevertheless, there's nothing in the text that would ever suggest this for a Roman Catholic. This is not from the magisterium. This is not ex cathedra that the Jews would never return. And there are millions of Roman. Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, Roman Catholic. They believe it's God's providence or plan to bring the Jews back to the land of Israel. There are millions of Catholics like this around the world.
I want to ask you a final question. You did live outside of Israel for, I guess, many, many years. And at some point you made Aliyah. What do you have to say to Jews that are outside of the land of Israel right now and their connection to the state of Israel?
Read Numbers chapter 33, verse 53. I mean, you could just read it for yourself. You don't need any commentary. But if you like commentaries, read Nachmanides, what he says there. Read his commentary on this remarkable oracle, that it's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, and not only that, one must hold on to the land of Israel whether the Messiah is here or not here. There are mitzvahs in the Torah that cannot be fulfilled anywhere but the land of Israel. When Moses, our teacher of blessed memory, entreated God to come to the land of Israel, Joshua would lead the nation, just let me go. The Talmud asks the question, why did Moses want to come to Israel? Did he want to stick his feet in the Kinneret? It wasn't interesting. There are mitzvos that can only be fulfilled here in the land of Israel. Look, let me say this to you. Let me be very, very plain. And I want to speak to the Jews living in Miami, the Jews who are living in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles. You could practice Judaism in the United States. You can practice Judaism in Toronto and Montreal, but you can only live it here in the land of Israel. It's time to come home.
Thank you, Rabbi Singer. I truly appreciate your time and your thoughts and everything that you shared with me. Where can people find more about you if you want to let them know how they can find you?
Please. So I have a website, outreachjudaism.org, and a YouTube channel, just my name, Tovia Singer. For full disclosure, most of my life is dedicated to responding to the questions, the pressing questions that Christians are asking of why Judaism doesn't accept the Christian Messiah. And I respond to these issues raised by Jews for Jesus and other groups. And you'll find this in both YouTube and on outreachjudaism.com or .org.
Thank you, Rabbi Singer. Truly appreciate your time.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל